I'm Don Straits. Welcome to the Corporate Warriors series of interviews with exceptional leadership talent. Today we are pleased to welcome Scott Landstrom. Scott is the CEO of Direct Grid Technologies. Currently, Scott is in the process of leading a successful M&A transaction. We are pleased to have Scott Landstrom be part of our program. Hi Scott, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Don. I'm delighted to be here.
Scott, you touched on an interesting subject in your thought leadership blog on driving accelerated growth. You analyzed specific issues in early stage funding and exit events for high-tech companies. Could you elaborate on that for us, please?
Certainly, Don. I wrote a blog entry on my thought leadership blog entitled U.S. Equity Markets, Failing the Startup Model That Built Silicon Valley. And in it, I tried to paint the picture of a bell curve of the corporate life cycle of a small company, especially in high tech, and the different funding events that have to occur to keep it healthy and growing, and then finally an exit event that has to happen to make the shareholders happy at the end of the day. And in this entry, I effectively postulated that the contrarian venture capitalist, who used to be very popular and very numerous on Sand Hill Road, has somewhat gone away. That the venture capital industry in the United States is thinking in a much more sector-aligned basis, and the contrarian VC, who would invest in sectors that are not in favor with the guy down the street, has really disappeared to some extent. So for instance, right now in social media, any business plan on the back of a cocktail napkin can get funded in social media, and other industries are out of favor, and not one single VC will even look at a business plan in that sector. So that's created problems with, in the favored space, companies that shouldn't be funded actually receiving funding, and in the out of favor space, companies that should be funded and have great technologies and great market ideas simply not being able to find the capital they need to thrive. So that was the beginning of the bell curve. I think at the end of the bell curve, if we look at the thresholds and the options available to high-tech companies for exit, I think that we find that the threshold to be able to qualify for an IPO has gone through the ceiling. Part of that is due to the appetite of the market, wanting to see more mature companies go IPO. Part of that is due to the fixed costs associated with Sarbanes-Oxley and the financial compliance rules. So pick a number. If you believe $7-8 million is required for Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, then the ability of a $20 or $30 or $40 million revenue company to go IPO just simply isn't there, because the weight of the financial burden of those costs simply doesn't make the IPO a feasible opportunity for them.
That was great insight, Scott. One of the other issues you highlighted in your blog is the parallel between the various stages of corporate development and the similarities to the developmental stages of organized football. I absolutely love that analogy, Scott. You compare and contrast the different skill sets required to be the quarterback of a high school, college, and pro football teams with the different talents that are necessary to lead high-tech companies at different levels or stages of development. Scott, can you elaborate a bit on that thread?
Sure, Don. You know, I write a column that's organized around the New York Giants football team, and in that I do a lot of analytical work. And in the field of football, if you were to suggest that you were going to take the same skill set and put them in a typical high school offense at quarterback, and then take that same person and invariably track them on a hard track to a college position starting at quarterback, and then do the same thing at the professional ranks, you'd have to find a very, very rare breed of athlete, because the requirements associated with those different stages of athletic competition are so dramatically different. Yet, unfortunately, there are a lot of CEOs and a lot of boards out there that believe that the skill set required to become a successful startup CEO at the founding stage can somehow be fast-tracked through all the different stages all the way up to eventual exit strategy of a major corporation. And I find it interesting that when you talk about this issue relative to football quarterbacks, everyone agrees, yet it's not as intuitive for some reason that the skill sets required for a CEO at the different stages of corporate development is dramatically different. And I think there's really, the net on this is there's really three classes of CEO at the startup level. There's the savant, who's capable of operating and being successful throughout the three stages. And this guy doesn't need any assistance or help. He grows and is just a tremendous talent. Unfortunately, those guys are very rare. The second type is the guy who can, with mentoring and training, develop the skill sets required to take it from startup to mid-sized growth company and eventually possibly even to the third step of a large-scale corporation. And then the third category is a situation where you simply have to change actors, where you have a guy who has reached his Peter Principle limit of how far he can take the company at either the startup or mid-sized stage, and we need to bring in someone else who has the skill sets associated with a different type of passing offense, if you will, to go back to the metaphor. So really, I think that's the point, and I think when you make it a parallel between the quarterback position and the CEO position, I think it helps illuminate the issues at hand a little bit better.
Next question, Scott. In your blog, you also touch on a more humanistic topic, asserting that the importance of corporate culture and shared values has never been more vital in developing high-performance teams. Scott, can you explain your thought process a little more?
Sure, Don. I think that we've spent part of today talking about much more strategic, tactical execution and strategy issues, and this is a softer, gentler topic around employee shared values and culture. And I think it can be very often overlooked in terms of the value that it plays in the modern enterprise, given our social norms today and how different they are from the 50s and 60s. And given the examples of outstanding companies that have exploited shared values and a strong corporate culture to tremendous professional results. If you look at the Googles and the Apple computers and the eBays and the Yahoos of the world, you find a culture. My dad was a vice president of sales back in the 50s and 60s, and he still punched a clock, even as a vice president. And so when you look at these companies that are more empowering to the individual, that are very friendly with a dissociated geographic workplace where employees and managers are working at home much more often, by having this strong emphasis on shared values and culture, that therefore allows a lot of decisions that used to need command and control to be made to now sort of be made on autopilot, because the values and the culture define the right decision for the manager or executive. So I think a strong corporate culture is not only a nice thing to have in the workplace in terms of a quality of work perspective, I think it's an enabling thing to have in terms of making more effective decisions more automatically.
Outstanding, Scott. Thank you very much for joining us today. Your insights have been fantastic. We will look forward to having you back at some point.
Great.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Tom.